In this lesson, let's talk a little bit about planning your site, design, and function. I'm all about making your site function properly, but to me it's equally as important that it look appealing and draw people in. If you don't get people past your homepage, you've kind of failed at what you've done because no one's going to go any further if it's not interesting. So let's talk about some of the things you need to ask yourself as you're beginning to plan your site. What's the message you're trying to convey? Are you selling a product? Are you trying to get across an idea or a concept to people? These are things that you need to think about. What is the message that you want people to take away from your website? Do you have particular colors in mind? Are you working with a brand? Do you need to use the exact colors that are in someone's logo, or are you free to use whatever colors you want? Remember that color can be used to help organize your content as well, so keep that in mind as you're designing. Have you chosen fonts? Fonts can be a great way to add interest and appeal to your site, but maybe the fonts aren't important to you. Maybe you're just sticking with a serif or a sans serif font. But if there is a designer font that's used in the logo and you want to repeat that through some of the headings throughout your content, those are things you need to think about ahead of time. What role will graphics play in the design of your content? Are you using graphics to help tell the story, or are they simply just there for fluff? And if they are there to tell the story, they need to be high quality, they need to match and be relevant with the content. Have you listed the necessary pages for the site? So in other lessons within this workshop, we talk about hierarchy and how you can plan your website and make sure that all of the right pages are in place. So it's a very good idea to plan all of this before you even begin building your first web page. What will be the focus of the homepage? Will it have graphics? Will it have an image gallery? Will there be a video? Will just simply be text content? You want to make it appealing. You definitely want to get your message across, but you want to make it appealing so people will stay on your site and actually want to explore. Placement of objects on the page can vary from boring to interesting. Let's explore that a little bit. Here's a basic layout of just a photo of one of the covered bridges, with the name of the bridge centered above it and the photo caption below it. This particular placement is boring. So the font is the same for the headline and for the photo caption, and it just looks boring. Here we've shaken it up a little bit just by simply moving the placement of the text. So most people tend to line things up with the edge of the photo. Here I just moved it off to the left more and the photo caption off to the right a little bit more, and already it's starting to look a little bit more interesting without really changing anything else. So this placement is definitely better, has a little bit more visual interest because now we've actually taken the headline and given it a different font. It's bolder, and the photo caption is now in italic. So the headline actually has more emphasis. It's far more important than the photo caption, even though the photo caption does have my name in it. Here I've taken it and started adding a little bit of color. So this I laid out in Illustrator, but this is the photo with a dropped shadow behind it. And I've picked up a color using the eyedropper tool and put a staggered rectangle behind it, sort of like a faux drop shadow. And look what I did with the photo caption, just running it up the side and making it in a smaller font so it's noticeable, but it doesn't jump out at you. And here I've chosen another color from the wood inside the bridge, and I've made this little rectangle that runs off the page and goes parallel with this top section. So again, just adding more visual interest. Things are layered here. I like how this photo is layered over top of both of these elements. Just again, drawing attention to the photo first and foremost. So it says you can see how color and placement can really make an impact, and I think it really does. The last piece of advice I'd like to share with you in this lesson is to explore. Ideas and inspiration are everywhere, so keep your eye open. You'll find things even in nature that can give you inspiration. Look at other sites you like, find ones you like, and even find ones you don't like. What don't you like about them? You want to make sure you don't repeat that within your own site. Check out print materials as well. Just because it's web design, good design is good design, so you might find something in print that you really like. I recommend to most of my students to start a notebook of inspiration. I get a 3-ring binder and I start making copies of things I like out of books, or tear out pieces of articles from newspapers or ads that I like. And I do recommend that you experiment. We do want our content to be functional. We want people to be able to get through it easily and logically, but we also want it to look really attractive so people will want to stay on the page. So these are just some ideas to keep in mind when you're planning your website. In this lesson, let's talk a little bit about the hierarchy of your site. So if you are planning a website, you really want to give some thought to the hierarchy of your pages, how they correspond with each other. You can go as deep or as shallow as you want with your hierarchy, but you really want to plan it ahead of time. It's much easier to fix problems before you actually build the site than to have to go back and correct it afterwards. You want your user to be able to navigate through your site forward and backward. When you're planning your website, you really do need to keep that in mind, again, so that your users can get through your site without having to hit the back button. You don't really want to have them having to do that a lot. Let's take a look at an example. Here's a simple site, joesusedcars.com, just a simple one that I made up, but I wanted to just demonstrate to you that this is the home page, and these are the 4 pages that come directly off the home page: domestic, import, about us, and contact Joe. We also have from some of those pages, there are pages offshooting from there. So from the domestic page, we have a new and a used page. From the import, we have a new and a used. From the About Us section, we have a Meet Joe and a Reviews, and then that one has 2 pages that spring off it: reviews about new cars and reviews about used cars. And then finally, we have the Contact Joe page. So this is basically showing you the hierarchy of this particular site, and I could go deeper here if I wanted to. So from my import page or my new page, I could go here and list them by brand if I wanted to. But that's what we mean when we refer to as the hierarchy of the site. Because there are many ways of arranging and reusing content throughout your website, you really want to think about ways that your content can be reused and some content that's not going to be reused. And taking a look at examples of web design that's out there can really help you to determine how you want your site to look and feel. So in a typical website, there's the navigation bar. It's sometimes on the left, but it's also sometimes across the top. In the example that you see here, which is my website, the nav bar is underneath the header, but it's a horizontal nav bar, so they can be horizontal or vertical. The banner graphic is usually across the top, and then the large central area in the middle, known as the body of the site, that's where the content is that is the main focus of your page. Most often the banner and the navigation should be on all of the pages, but the information in the middle will change depending on the content for each individual page. So this just gives you a basic idea of what the hierarchy of your website is. And again, if you think this through in the beginning, think of how many levels deep you want your site to go, and also give some thought as to what is going to appear on every page as opposed to what is going to be independent content separately on each individual page. I think it will really help you in the long run to plan out your website. In this lesson, let's talk a little bit about making your first wireframe. So when you're designing a website, everybody wants to dive in and work with the visual elements right away, but it's really crucial that you lay out your site so that it actually works and functions the way it's supposed to. So the wireframe is really what communicates the layout of the page without getting caught up in the color and the design elements. Wireframes can save a lot of time and effort because they can help you to really identify where things need to be on the page and catch some mistakes before you actually go and build the content. So you can use them to keep track of items such as your headers and footers, menus, that sort of thing. The key is to nail the layout down before you go in and start building the site, because it's much harder to go back and fix those problems once you've started. Here are some great tools for working with wireframing. So obviously a pencil and paper would be a really good choice, not something I do very often because I'm so computer savvy these days. Adobe Fireworks is another excellent one for wireframing, but there are some other tools here that I have listed, and I got these courtesy of smashingmagazine.com. So it's a great resource for a lot of other creative things, but they had a wonderful section at one point on different kinds of tools that you can use for wireframes, so I thought I'd share that with you here. So remember when you're laying out your site that some of the things are going to be on the pages all the time, on all of the pages like the banner and the navigation, but some content is going to be individual on certain pages. So this is an example of the site that we're going to be creating, the blog site. This is what the finished project is going to look like. So you see that we have 4 separate blog posts here. This is going to be our aside tag, which is going to give us that little sidebar. We have a simple navigation up here, and then this is our banner graphic at the top, and we have a footer at the bottom. So this is as simple as it can be, creating what the wireframe would look like. So there's the nav bar and the header, the graphic. There's the sidebar and the 4 blog posts and the footer. It doesn't need to be any more elaborate than that. It's just showing you the layout of the page to make sure that everything goes together. It's a really good idea to start with a wireframe before you go any further. I just threw this one together in Illustrator, but again, you can simply do it with pencil and paper if that's what works for you. So creating your wireframe before you get started, a great step before you actually begin to build your site. In this lesson, let's talk about how our site flows, that is, how our user will actually read the content, how their eye will flow across it, something that I call a user flow. We want this to be as user-friendly as possible. So here I have a screenshot of my website, creatable.com, and I just wanted to review how the user actually typically reads this content. So I've added these little arrows to show you where the content is being read. Typically people start from the top left in most cases, and then they might come to, they start at the header, and then they might view this graphic, and then they just start going across the page and down. That's typically the flow that people use. So you want to keep that in mind when you're laying out your pages. It's also a good idea to not have very large or bright graphics that might actually draw their attention away from the important content you want them to read, and to use the hierarchy as well as you can as far as headlines being bigger than body text and so forth. Again, we want to make this as user-friendly as we can. So it's important to remember that size matters. So if your headlines are larger than your body copy, that's normal. That helps people to be able to grab the headline first and then move on to your body copy. You don't want to have it the other way around. If you have a very large graphic in the lower right corner of the page that's very bright and eye-catching, it's typically going to draw someone's eye away from the copy they should be reading first at the top of the page. So keep that in mind. Color also matters, and so by using brighter and typically lighter colors, you draw people's attention more. So again, you want to keep that in mind. And also placement is important. So where things are placed on the page, again, I mentioned that big graphic in the bottom right-hand corner, that can draw people's eye away from the content they should be reading first. So keep all of that in mind, size, color, and placement, when you're laying out your pages and preparing your blog.